Last week, Louise started us off on a new series looking at Psalm 23. On the whole, it might be very familiar to you and it can sound quite simple and straightforward, but it's packed with so much goodness. I just love it. Well, why don't we start by reading the whole psalm together? Psalm 23, a psalm of David. The Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right paths for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Today, we're going to continue to look at verse 2, and it reads, He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. What comes to mind for you when you read this? Now, I'll be honest with you, when I read this, I actually often think of The Sound of Music. The Sound of Music, where Julie Andrews, she sings, she floats and dances around the hills with such freedom, and she hops across the river with such grace. Now, I know it might be a bit odd. It's probably not what you picture, especially as she doesn't actually lie down in the green pastures. But there is a sense of tranquility and a sense of rest and freedom. In this context, green pastures, it's fresh. There's fertile fields where sheep can graze all day and be completely nourished. The phrase quiet waters, hey, it's just so peaceful. And I imagine a quiet, gentle stream where the sheep can just drink from the water whenever they like without fear of being in danger. I'd love to share with you today a few thoughts as I reflect on this verse. So it reminds me of the importance of rest and rejuvenation in my own life. During lockdown, we were forced to slow down, and this was really hard for many people. I feel like we've quickly gone back into the fast pace and busy world. I definitely feel it in my own life for sure. When we're so busy, it's really easy to neglect our physical, our emotional, and our spiritual needs because we just need to get things done. But what we find is that we get to a point where we become exhausted and burnt out. But God desires for us to find rest and refreshment in Him. He wants us to take time to slow down, to be still, and to recharge. When we lie down in green pastures, we can come to the one who gives us nourishment for our bodies, for our minds, and for our souls. Notice that it says, He makes me lie down in green pastures. To me, it suggests that sometimes we just don't even recognize that we need to lie down. For example, it's only when we get ill that we are forced to lie down. I was sick with COVID just before and during Easter, which I was absolutely devastated about, as it meant that I had to miss all the Easter services and I had to even miss my sister's baby shower. And I jokingly said, oh, well, He makes me lie down in green pastures. But the funny thing, that because I did have to stop, hand things over and just rest, something within me changed. My whole body had to relax into the posture of lying down, as I did feel quite unwell. The great thing is that despite not being well, I actually felt really rested. But why is it often that we put ourselves in situations where we have no choice but to lie down? Perhaps that's why He makes us lie down, because God knows us. When I think about this, I don't neglect the nourishment of food for my physical health. That's because I love food. I make sure I take time out to eat all my meals, all 3 meals, and all the snacks in between. But I do find that I can more easily ignore my emotional needs and my spiritual needs until I get to a point where I have no choice, but I have to deal with it. Do you ever find yourself neglecting your needs, whether it's physical, emotional, or spiritual? So when we neglect any of these things, we often find ourselves in a state of stress, anxiety, or restlessness. Why do we do that to ourselves? And why do we do that to others? Because it affects other people too. When we lie down in green pastures, we can find rest in God's presence. When we look at the next line, he leads me beside quiet waters. It implies a sense of calm and peace. In the world that's often chaotic and turbulent, we can find solace in God's presence. When we're overwhelmed by the business of life, we can turn to him and find rest for our souls. Jesus himself, he invites us in Matthew 11, verses 28 to 29. It says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls." God's presence is not one of chaos or confusion. The water is not a raging sea. It is one of peace and of clarity. When we are in his presence, we see clearly. We find direction and guidance for our lives, in the small and in the big things. The spiritual and emotional part of us is just as important as the physical. Do we make sure that we get time to fuel our spirits and our emotions? When we're connected with our Lord Jesus, we find that our spiritual being is strengthened and it's encouraged, and this affects the emotional part of our being. What if, rather than waiting until we have to lie down and sit beside quiet waters, that we frequently, daily come and lie down in green pastures, keeping ourselves nourished and refreshed in the presence of God? What would that look like for you? How would your stress levels be? How would your anxiety levels be? How would that change your relationship with others and with God? How would it change your outlook each day? God knows that we need to function spiritually, emotionally, and physically, and he provides just that for each one of us. We all have access to, and we are invited to lie down and bask ourselves in his goodness. He gives us rest and he gives us peace for our souls. Now, if we don't already, let this be something we do as part of our daily living, and not just in a time of stress and desperation when we really, really need God. Let our whole being be led to green pastures and the quiet waters every day as part of our lives, so that we live in the truth that God provides for us and he cares for our every need. He gives us rest and peace for our souls each day as we walk with him. Just as most of us eat 3 meals a day, with snacks in between, what would it look like to nourish ourselves emotionally and spiritually in the same way? What can you do differently perhaps this week? Is it that you could wake up earlier to have a devotional breakfast? Is it that you have a worshipful lunch? Is it that perhaps you choose to fast for dinner? No matter what you have going on, deadlines to meet, you have a child who demands all your time and your attention, you have so many things to juggle and you just don't know whether you're coming or going. Wouldn't you agree that it's just always worth a lie down in the green pastures that God has for us, to find that peace and a renewed perspective? You might know this, but the Japanese are known to take naps at work because they work so hard. A nap will actually help them to re-energize and continue being productive in their work. I read somewhere that sleeping is actually a sign of confidence in the workplace. Is lying down in green pastures and being beside green waters a confidence for us? It leads me to come to the conclusion that yes, it is a confidence. It's a confidence in God himself. Do we have the confidence that God provides for all of our needs and refreshes our whole being in order to live a life in all its fullness?